It's going to take a couple of minutes. But yeah, God, and I've been watching your stuff, which is so cool because I get as much out of you taking a picture at the beach behind a really cool rock. I think I saw that a couple of days ago. I get as much out of that as I do the stuff that you write. It's amazing how we're.
Because I was saying that the whole communication systems will change now. Everything will be energetic.
Yes.
So in other words, we don't even need to write or to broadcast, use words.
Yeah.
We are energetically broadcasting, and that's it. And that's why I had this most amazing encounter with the elephant matriarch about 3 weeks ago. And then I wanted to go off somewhere, and they laid me absolutely flat back on my back. These last few days, I've been absolutely on my back. And then miracles happen. And, like I've just come through a miracle this afternoon. I just say, wow, 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 wow. All these years, I've been looking for this. I've been waiting for this. And now it's finally happening. So what you say about the timelines being lifted, it's absolutely true.
Well, I'm lucky because I get to sit in this chair and I get to talk to people like you. And there's a few people like you that have the level of connection and intel. And over I don't know, probably the last 3 years, I noticed that the people that had the precog intel, like not like, oh, it's going to happen 2 years or 5 years, but anyway, what I noticed was that their timelines kept coming forward, and I said, "Are we accelerating this?" And they would say, "I think so, yeah." And then, but this last one, this last one started for us on March the 10th, which was Morgan's birthday, which is also the day the name Soulogy was given to me. And then 2 years after that, which was a year before I met her, Soulogy One Studios was given to me on her birthday. But on that day, we were sitting down here, and it was in the evening. We were with a friend, and Morgan looked at me and said, "I can't believe it's my birthday, and I'm just okay with everything. Like, I can't see my kids and the things that come up on, dates like that." And about 30 minutes later, I looked at her, and she had tears in her eyes, and I knew it was bigger than she was going to get, emotional. And I'm telling you, from that point on, I realized, because I went into deep communion like a lot of people, she did, and the messages were incredible. And then once that happened, and that incident happened over there, where we came together, and she was uncomfortable with it, because she's like, "What's going on here?" Like
It happens.
yeah. And then she realized, well, it's got to be him. And then she let go, and then had a great experience or whatever. But so yeah, the messages coming in, as you know, in I want to say the last 6 weeks, they've been so like everything. They've just accelerated. They've gotten bigger. The information's bigger. The memory's coming back. And so no different than 2 or 3 nights ago when I was sitting here and I was reading, and I was told, I heard, you need to pull up Judith's soul reading. So I went to my email and I searched for your name, and I went back and I found it and I read it, and I can't explain it, but in the soul reading, you say, when you read this, you're going to be activated. And I remember reading it. I've read it 3 or 4 times, but this time I got it was between the lines. It was between the words and the letters, but something came in, and it felt like, there was like a dotted line, trail of my lineage. And then it just went in bold, like the Elysium, Avalon, the Druid thing, the Bard thing. And as I'm reading it, I'm getting more clarity as to what my role is. And so I'm very thankful that you did that soul reading for me and for us. And I'm very thankful obviously for the connection that we have, because it's getting clearer and clearer. But it's good to have you back. We're live. We've got
much. Thank you.
75, 80 people in the house. So there'll be a few more coming. Sorry we're late. It's Todd. You know that. I'm always running a little late. But it's good to have Judith here. She's such an important part of Soulogy in our eyes, because uh, for so many reasons. But one thing about what you're saying and what you'll say today, and what you were alluding to a second ago, in terms of how the communication level and the connectivity methods have changed. Like I said to myself in third week in March, I walked out here in the back and I said, we're in a different world. My consciousness has changed. And it feels like the team consciousness, the active consciousness that I have, which is made up of whatever it's made of, has shifted into a balance where there is a even hand. It's just the humans having a hard time getting used to the way that everything works now. Are you feeling any of that?
Yes, very much so. I mean, it's interesting because after I went to the elephant park and I had this absolutely amazing, it's interesting because I had my intuition telling me, go to the elephant park. I said, but you know what, I want to write. And they said, go to the elephant park. And every time I sort of like postpone it, this comes right back into my face. So already I booked it and I got a friend to go with me. And interestingly enough, what happened is that the day that I booked, the other chalets were full, and then they suddenly said, no, they had this one big chalet, but we can get it for the same price. So we had this huge chalet, right, with the most fantastic views. Everything was just sorted out for us. And then the day was driving, it was suddenly, the first thing that we saw in the park was the elephants. And as it is, I was sitting in the car and I was just feeling my heart center opening, and I was like beaming the energy into the elephants. And immediately there was this reaction because there was a lot of mothers with their little elephants, etc. there at this one warhol, because it's incredibly dry there. But it was immediately energy came back to me. And then the day after we were driving, and the next minute as we were driving, this matriarch appears before me. And she was saying to me, you humans do not understand anything. She says, you do not understand. And then she tells me, she says that the elephants, through their feet, they've walked these ancient elephant paths. And as they walk the ancient elephant paths, they are walking the earth's energy lines, and they are clearing them. And here in Africa, they actually took the elephant paths and they built a lot of the roads on the old ancient elephant paths. But they don't walk them anymore because of fences and barriers, and putting people in barriers and putting animals in barriers and putting fences down. And she said, what you do is you are blocking off the energy. You are blocking off the interchange between all and everything, because all is consciousness, all is soul. Mm-hmm. Because you do not understand. And then she said, but this is changing now. Yeah. We are going to walk the ancient paths again, and we will do it as one consciousness, one being. Yeah. And in that day, we saw more than 200 elephants, and each of those elephants put a tribute in. In other words, I've never had such an exchange in my life. I actually sat with tears in my eyes when I realized how the animal kingdom is now trying to tell us, yeah, listen, the days of boundaries, the days of putting fences down are over. Yeah. It's time that you understood the interconnectedness of everything and all consciousness, because in truth, we are all one. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. One body moving is one body. And that's interesting. Very interesting about the elephants, because I mean, people talk about not to take anything away from any sentient being or essence, but a lot of people talk about whales and the dolphins. But these elephants are they're grid keepers. I mean, what they said about the trails and the ley lines. I saw this meme a couple of days ago, and it was a leaf. It was one single leaf with a drop of water on it, and there were 16 ants on the leaf drinking the water. And they formed a perfect geometric shape, the way that the four sections of four positioned themselves on the leaf so that each ant could get their share of the water, and so that the leaf would maintain its balance so that the bubble of the droplet of water would work in collaboration with them, in terms of them getting to the water. But the reason that I brought that up is because of what you said about the elephant's wisdom, and that is that picture of the 16 ants drinking water from a leaf, said so much to me about what you're saying. Like we for whatever reason, and we can we can always talk about that, but we broke the design. Basically, we stepped out of the natural order, right?
The natural order, the divine order of everything, where everything slots in perfectly and all is interconnected. There's a beautiful story that I read, is actually the truth, in a book by Lyle Watson. Watson was one of the authors that really started the consciousness movement in a lot of ways. And in this area, he was recording about the last of the elephant matriarchs of the Neisner elephants. They on the forest here, quite up the coast where I am, standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea, and a whale communicating, and he was witnessing this. So it's the last of a whale's matriarch and the last of an elephant matriarch. You must remember that whale hunting was then still very much part of and until they stopped whale hunting, and how these two were lamenting.
I got you. Yeah.
When I read that, I had tears, and I thought to myself, when will we start to understand that all life has soul?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if something is an ant or whether it's an elephant or whether it's a lion or what. Everything has soul. A tree has soul. Every plant has soul. When we start to understand that everything has a function in the whole, we cannot hurt or harm anything, because we hurt and harm ourselves.
Exactly.
In the greatest degree.
And and I felt like for the last 2-3 months that we're the universe reconnecting with itself in a way. But I've that's come to mind quite a bit. And so I think about some of the, and you've know this because of the soul readings, but I remember when I first woke up and I had a lot of activity with souls that were stuck, and I would help them go cross, and but one of the things I was exposed to was that when they went into council, I guess I would describe it with what they showed me were the silent angels. They were all in white, and they were basically telling the soul what had happened. And the big thing that I got from that those experiences, was that the soul was shown how everything that they did, how it was connected to everything else. And that was kind of like the life review. Like, oh my God, I didn't know that I was creating all these ripples and repercussions, not only to the earth, but to the whole, the whole thing. So I think that that's going to be kind of interesting to see how that's physically, actualized and manifested, or what's manifested as a result, as people start to actually embody and be and do in respect to what you're talking about, and that everything, thought, words, and action, the connectivity involved with each one of those acts, or anything that comes from us. I guess it's called responsible co-creation.
Yeah, yes. It's a ripple effect, cause and effect. Mm-hmm. What you put out comes back to you. It doesn't matter. It might take a few million years, but it will get back to you in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And but what is so beautiful is that we are now literally being lifted into a state where we can take full responsibility again, as we stand in the fullness of the truth of who we are.
Yeah.
And that means that we stand as co-creators, understanding that if we create within divine laws, we cannot create what will harm anyone, including ourselves.
Yeah.
because we come from the heart of love. If we are in a state of love, we create with love and within love. And that is the highest frequency that we can create in. And once our heart is open, we are attacked carefully what we speak, we attack carefully what we think, we are carefully what we're acting out, because everything has a ripple effect on the whole. And that is the beauty of taking responsibility, because now you take responsibility from the knowing that you are a co-creator. What do you wish to create? What type of life do you wish to create? What type of relationship do you wish to create? What is it that you wish to bring into form and being with another soul? And once the soul have the same vision and the same outlook, they can actually move into a greater love, which they never would be able to find if they did not have that same vision and the same outward look, or the outward calling, the purpose, if I can call it that way, because that is what binds soul together.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have never thought that, of course, we were in Hawaii, right? Up to the point right before you had written that soul reading, or combined the soul readings, and you mentioned it in there, which was interesting. I got reacquainted with that. But so we were there last week of July, and then I've told you this story, and we wake up one morning and go, I guess we're going to the mainland. Like, we're going to leave paradise. But this was a lot like that. And so there was a knowing that came in March, and none of this fits the old human paradigm. Like, there was no long discussion. Everything was telepathic, intuitive, and knowing. And so as a human, I'm going, how in the hell can I be on the other side of the world? But we're growing more connected, and our love is growing stronger. And not only that, but you can see the connectivity of our connection and how its ripples are affecting other people and vice versa. So and I used to say this for the last couple of years, if it doesn't make sense and you're being told to do it, go do it. Go see the elephants. You know what I mean? But it's really taken on a new meaning to me. Like it's not just, and I totally agree with you, because I say this all the time. Who do you want to be with? Be with who you love, do what you love. But there's something else has changed now, like how we interpret that, how we do that, and how we gauge that. Because, like, if you look at this situation with Morgan and I, as these old veils were dropped, then the relationship and the world and life itself all becomes this totally different experience, right? So it's like because another thing I've noticed too, I don't want to forget this other question in the back of my head, but I'll remember, is that people are declaring their personal sovereignty in little ways, right? Little ways of liberation. And that makes sense to me, that that's going to be the overriding force, because it's coming from true divine love. You know what I mean? That umbilical cord, universal, absolute, and we're starting to click to it. So I'm like in just amazement. I think to myself, what's it going to look like at the end of the summer? This has got to have huge ramifications on the collective experience.
When I was called to go and look for the white flame, I had no idea. That was in 2004 when I started connecting with the white flame and the temple of a white flame, as I write about in my book, Was Born in Africa. And I had the most amazing experience just now before I went on air, in that it became a quest. And in my quest, I had to go and open up the spinal column of the earth. I had to work with the energies of the spinal column of the earth, which goes up Africa on the 33-degree longitude line. And that eventually got me to Egypt at about 2 years ago. And I opened up immensely things. And lately I'm being drawn right back to Egypt, and thought to myself, okay, I'm not quite sure what's going on. But with that, after I came back from the elephants, what do? I have the most excruciating pain, and I eventually end up with the doctors, and I have scans and whatever else. And then now the last 3 days, they put me in bed. I could not move. I was told I must lie down flat. I'm not allowed to move. I'm not allowed to pick up anything. I'm not allowed to move anything. I'm not allowed to go on any stair. And I myself, what the heck is going on? So now I'm lying in bed. And for myself, okay, I'm now sitting it. I don't know what's happening, but I know something big is happening. And the next minute, I am being brought to all the work that has been done in all these years. And I'm showing how humanity has shifted, through that, how the earth's energy lines are vibrating and how they're being brought into absolute alignment now with the new earth. And it's pulsating and it is vibrant, it's alive, it's a whole new rebirth. And the next minute, I'm being brought back to the Giza pyramids. I'm being brought back to the underground chambers and the underground cities there, which are still there, by the way. They haven't moved anywhere. They're just in a different frequency band. And as I am moving in there, I am being shown how everything is started to get activated again. How even what they call a sarcophagus, which are never sarcophagus because they never were, then people were not buried in there. They may have put mummies in them later on, but they actually are energetic centers and energy fields.
Yeah.
And I'm literally shown how everything is awakening in a deeper sense. And it's like pulsating with life. And this is going into all the arteries of the earth. So literally we are being lifted in a much higher frequency band than ever before. And I was standing in where they showed me Luxor and in Karnak where we were, and I'm being brought back to the Miriams, the high priestesses that were called the Marys, but in actual fact that Mary was a high priestesshood.
Mm.
And I am shown how Moses' sister was Miriam. The Miriams have continued and have been the ones that have held those energetic forms right into the highest ways of being through the white flame, which is the highest flame, which is the highest fire there is.
Wow.
Now, Serapis Bey always held that fire in custody for humankind at Luxor. But I was shown when I started my journey that I was in Atlantis when the white flame was taken away from humanity and actually gone into Andromeda for safekeeping. And I was told that this white flame will only be returned if human beings get to that stage where they can access that consciousness again, which is the consciousness of purity. So my work in the last few years has been to bring this back, to bring in that, and to really open up the whole thing. And my soul readings do this at the energetic level, and all my work and my book that I'm doing, I'm just an instrument.
Yeah.
This day, I'm actually taken, and I was shown the white flame returning to the planet.
Really? When was that? Was that a month ago?
It was just a few hours before I went on Earth, now on air with you.
Really? Oh, that's big.
And I actually stood there and I thought to myself, it takes to get me flat on my back so I could actually experience that in the highest degree. And then I realized the miracle of it all.
Yeah. Well, obviously there's so many meanings and purposes and, aspects to anything that happens, but like definitely, I'm sure that you must have been part of a team that was anchoring it. I mean, it's another thing that I've noticed too. This is right up your alley, but I've noticed that in the last 2 or 3 weeks, a lot of my early aspects, we'll just put it that way, is six biblical prophets: Jesus, Magdalene, Archangel Michael, even Merlin, and some spirit guides that were on a more personal level. But I've noticed they've come back in the field, and also what is it, Atlantis, Avalon, Egypt. And I don't know what it is, if it's just code filling in, memory coming in. But the one that came in, it's funny because you mentioned it, that I've never really seen before was Moses. And I saw little bit I could retain, because it was I think it was in like lucid dream, or when I was falling asleep or waking up. But it wasn't like looking at him through the historic narrative. He looked to me like he was, I would have to say, like half man, half God, or half star. It was not a human like you and I look today. It was a large man, very large, very strong, and he had some kind of star family features. And I thought, what is this all about? But I just see it kind of as everything connecting, reconnecting, and seeing the connection. Maybe that's what it is.
It's the ancient energies are being returned. In other words, the ancient as it was in paradise before we lost the plot. Yeah. So what's happening is those energies of purity, when we were still in the state of purity, we were still in the state of paradise in brackets, is now being returned. That's the highest frequency. That's the seventh dimension, and the ninth, 12th, what is busy opening again. So we are literally being tuned in now to the states of the highest that we ever accessed as soul. And so many souls have now come in who actually carry that within them.
Wow. These kids.
You see, you carry this within you. Once you start to awaken and you understand that you're a universal master that came into earth to now lift the whole of humanity into that state of mastery. That's why we're going through this whole metamorphosis. We are going through this whole change in us. But if we believe ourselves small, we cannot stop it. We cannot step into that highest thing. It's got nothing to do with ego, because the more aware you become, the less ego you have. Yeah. It's about humble service and being understanding and remembering the truth of who and what you are and standing in it and bringing that to humanity with great love.
Yeah. Yeah, it really starting to make sense that the biggest thing to accept is our own power and our own the reality of what we are, because it's starting to get to the point now where there's irrefutable evidence occurring on individual bases, which can include like instant medical cure. Somebody reprograms and there's a physical transformation in their body and the tumor's gone or whatever. We hear more stories like that. Then, of course, with these kids, I mean, how many kids is it going to take for the world to go, why are these kids talking about their planet, their incarnation in the previous planet, and all this other information? But I think at the core of it, which I find really fascinating, is the personal actions that a human being takes in honor and reverence to thine own self be true, right? That they're taking that seem like little small things, right? But they're not. They're huge. They're basically an embodiment of what you're talking about, because having the information is one thing, but to utilize it's the other. And that's the way I feel what happened in the last month was that enough people or enough souls started to choose themselves in a really big way and do what you said at the beginning of the show. Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And the difference I'm seeing is the limitations that held us back that weren't even there are being superseded by the force of a free will aligning with divine will. So that's powerful. A lot of heroes' journeys are starting to come full circle.
It is, because interesting. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and he said to me, Judith, just tell me one person whose life has not changed in the last year. And I said, yes. You know, with some it can be in a negative way, or some it can be a positive way, but negative and positive are two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, people are awakening now at a rate that I've never seen before. It's quite amazing. And I'm being told that so many souls will now step to the fore and just say, well, okay, we need to now start creating a different world, a different reality, a different way of life. As you say, there's you, Morgan, sitting on both sides of the earth, but you still are in oneness. There is nothing that actually can even separate us from anything or anyone. Once we understand that you don't need to be physically with somebody to co-create, you go for a paradigm shift, because you suddenly realize, but wow, you know, I don't need to be with that person physically anymore. I can be in energetic form, in any way connected, and co-create with them in the most amazing ways.
Yeah. And such is the, to me, the significance of what we call sacred sexuality, which is obviously far more than a physical encounter. It's really, to me, it's more so identifying this life force that we have, that we are, and the creation aspect, the creation potential of it within any of us. And what I see with and I see it in a totally different way now too, much more expanded, is that we're we're coming into that knowing that frequency, that connection, that umbilical that we all have attached, or the thread having attachment to all things, is we're like, I don't know, I see it like we're in this new, almost, well, like new code, new code, taking the old with our experience. Now we're awake, and now what do we do with it? So we're in a, as Franco says, we're in a creation atmosphere. We're no longer in a manifestation atmosphere. We're in a creation atmosphere where, and I love this because this came up last week. It was not only are we walking into something that looks totally different, but we also have the ability to fine tune it as we're walking, right? And make quick changes. And it's pretty fascinating because it's happening really fast too.
Yeah, it is fascinating because we now can actually co-create a totally new world in a totally different manner, but wiser of what we experienced before, hopefully, so that we can understand this didn't work in the end. Duality didn't work. Duality brought separation. It brought boundaries. It brought, now we can expand that, we can leave that. And what do we have? We have endless possibilities. We're stepping into infinite space with infinite possibilities, infinite co-creative ways. There are no boundaries. There is nothing that can stop us from stepping fullness in our co-creatorship with great love. That to me is the most amazing gift that is given for those souls who are ready to receive that and actually start expanding on it. And there is not one soul who hasn't got that ability within themselves. It's just that so much and that is something what has told me today, is as a new spinal column has now been formed. And that is why they said I had this terrible pain in my back at Good Friday, because I often do it for the whole of humanity when it comes through me. But they literally tell me that this is the lower world. This is the lower experience, the lower earth. Okay? That was the earth of duality and wars and whatever else. And there's the fears and the false belief systems and programming and whatever it's become now for ages. They literally showed me that we're now transcending that lower world and we're moving into the higher world. But now your lower chakras and your lower back is where the old world is still there in a physical, some reality. Now they literally tell me that when the spinal column now connects, which they showed me, that lower part of it now, the new one, this is all dissolving. You will
Yeah.
be brought to the stage where you need to let go of the whole of everything that ever was, in order that you can ascend fully into your new embodiment, the light body form, which is, by the way, much taller than this one that we have at the current moment.
Yeah. That all resonates. And the other thing too is like you can see in the space of people's lives and their forward motion, right? You can see these people that are, I keep saying it's like walking around in a Forrest Gump bubble. You're impervious. I don't know, you're impervious because you're no longer, reading the world out there. You're present, and you're present in this bubble, which is like the light body thing, to like you were talking about, or the magnetic electromagnetic field of the heart, right? It's big. It's just big. We take up a lot of space, and so to see these things happening, in people making these moves and steps in their lives, and really we've been doing this for a few years, but there's something's a little bit different now. And I think your description of the spine and the lower chakras is significant to that, because it involves the physicality. And the other thing that's interesting too, I've talked to several people in the last 6 weeks that have had back problems. You know what I mean?
That's what they said to me. It's a lower self. It's a lower earth, the lower creation. The creation goes in tiers. It goes in spirals. Okay. So we're at the bottom tier here. We old 3D is the bottom tier here. We're now moving up here. Eh? So what now? This one is still okay. What do I cling to? What do I hold to? What do I think? We need to transcend that in order to rise now.
Yeah. Some of the channelings that Morgan got over the years, these last couple of years when we were doing this every night, pretty much, involve so many different subjects. But on what you were just talking about, at the same time, I think I told you this last time you were on, you got that download about the spine. She did. Somebody else did too, and I remember this very distinctly. But because of the physical aspect of it, and because like so much of this intel, people are coming out with it at the same time, that I look at these things that occur with much more much more interest when they involve the physical body. Like that tells me that the whole mind, body, soul is really coming together. And if we're seeing it in Judith Kusel or Morgan Lee, or 5 or 6 other people, it's got to be taking hold around the world. I mean, there's got to be, who knows how many people. There has to be. We had Morgan, Yvonnya, a few ladies. It just came up. We had this what was it? Sacred Silent Circle yesterday, and then we had a show. We're talking about it last night. And people came on, and I really got to see some things over the course of the 2 productions, from the standpoint of the chair I sit in, and what my mission, in the mission oriented stuff. Right, I was able to see a frequency band that I knew at the soul level. Okay, this is the kind of energy that we're heading into now. That the platform will be putting out there, which is really, in so many words, the voice of the Mother Goddess. But the amazing thing was that 138 people come into a room in silence, and I had to turn my camera off because I was going to start crying. Because as I was looking at each of these people, and I would say that there might have been, nothing against the men, 8 or 10 men there, and they were amazing. One of them moved me so much I had to send him a message in the middle of this 20-minute. But when I was looking at these ladies, and I'm not looking, obviously I'm looking at the energetics. It was like a download, because I realized as I watched them in devotion, right? Because that's what they were doing. They were actually opening their heart and doing the work. And we were able to peek in and see what they've been doing alone sometimes with a sister, but mostly alone all these years. And it just spoke to me really loud about the mother energy or the grandmother energy. That mother energy that never gives up on their kid, that when everybody else is sleeping, they're in their room with a candle on praying for everybody. Right. And I saw that. I thought, several things. One, this is the frequency that Soulogy is headed towards. Keep your eyes open, and Morgan does a great job of bringing these type of energies on. And then the second thing was, wow, we just saw a microcosm of what's happening to the world. This silent, powerful, sacred energy of the divine feminine, the mother goddess, is impacting everybody. And it's like a plasma to me. It's like you can't. It's a totally different. And I thought that was a big marker, especially given the last few weeks of what's gone on, and even the last few days. But that's really exciting. That really is
I've just
exciting.
gone for 2 weeks of silence because of we put me silent. But but I even could not write because I was told silence. Don't write, but don't put out. Know that silence speaks. And it was literally like the heart is opening. You're broadcasting.
Yes.
But you don't speak. You just have silence. And that to me was wow, And they said, yes. Remember that the heart speaks a language of its own. And it's a language everybody can understand at their heart center, at their soul center. It's not light language. It is just a language from soul to soul to soul, which they all can tune into and understand.
Yeah.
The power of love.
And it's a lot different than earth love. It's that
Pure,
energy.
pure
It's that,
love.
Yeah. It's that energy I saw in those women's faces yesterday. I mean, that was powerful. And again, here we go. If it doesn't make sense, do it. Because, as somebody who's put out a lot of stuff over the years with intention and with the focus on trying to be in alignment as best to the ability, that still doesn't make sense. How can you put a bunch of people on a camera and be in silence and never say a word? We're starting now. Thank you for coming. That was it. And in between, there's no words. You could see it. You could see the power, and as a symbolic of or a physical representation. It's taking on physical ramifications now, and that's what I saw. I thought, oh wow, what's that going to do to the field? Because it doesn't look like that's the type of energy that's going to take very long to be felt.
It will be felt by everybody. I was reading a few years ago. I was reading the reports of one of those that were put on solitary confinement by the Nazis in the Second World War. It was actually a beautiful book. It was in German, but it was about this guy. He was a pastor in the Lutheran church. And he literally puts into, because a lot of the Christians also got, sort of got into the gas chambers and were killed and whatever. So it's not just the Jews. But anyway, so he goes into this whole thing. He said, when you are in solitary confinement, okay, you sit in silence. You haven't got anybody else to it. But he said the experiences that he had in that cell in solitary confinement defies any words, any descriptions.
Yeah.
And then he said sometimes he felt compelled to speak. So he literally hung himself sort of on the bars where he actually spoke, could communicate with the other prisoners, through the bars from one cell to the other. And they were prostitutes and the things that they put in. But he said those were the most amazing connections that he ever had, because every soul was open to being receptive at a soul level that they would not normally have been. And when I was reading that book, I thought to myself, wow, it just shows you the power of silence. And if you go and read all the great masters that ever walked on earth, they all went into solitary confinement, whether they went into the caves or whether they actually withdrew from society for periods of time to go and seek silence.
Yeah.
Because I find that if I seek silence, I move into a higher frequency band.
Yes.
Which defies words, because now you communicate at a much higher level with all that is that you cannot put into words, because human words fail me.
Yeah. Yes, and that part of it's coming online more too. I mean, I've noticed this in so many ways that message exchange. Right before this period started, we announced a Soulogy Fest, and just the way that all came together, because we started with 4 men, 4 women. Let's uphold this 50-50 frequency in everything we do from this point forward. And then the energy came and everything went to heck. I mean, that's what it looked like. But now here we are a few weeks later, and there's been no force, there's been no agenda. Everybody's been in a collaborative, cooperative, non-judgmental, staying there. You know what I mean? And it's just come together. Now it's not. I mean, by the human terms, we would push panic buttons, but looking at it energetically, you can see it's right where it needs to be, and it's just a reflection of everything else. And the more I look around, the more I see this continuity and balance and new earth experience, I guess, a new collective experience, because connectivity and communication are changed, like you're talking about. I mean, we obviously we were in the same boat with a lot of people. We were in solitude. We made this big decision, but it wasn't a big decision. It was just a knowing. And what I'm getting at is, so as we were communicating in the old way and the new way, so to speak, we both noticed that the things that we might have said or wrote in the old way, which was nothing bad, just how we would try to express ourselves, because this is where we came from. We wouldn't, it's not that we wouldn't read them. We would just go, oh, okay. Like, in other words, I guess the human, that's just, kind of going away. That's not the overriding thing here. It's what we know, what we feel. Like we don't even have to talk about this. And so I see that being something that's going to get really loud, because I don't think it's just going to be between 2 people. It's going to be, and it's already happening, I'm sure. It's going to be on entire issues, issues or circumstances, that type of thing.
It's communicating soul to soul again,
Mm-hmm.
heart to heart. I don't need to say anything. Just my presence will communicate to you what you need to know. Like I broadcast through my presence.
Yeah.
And if I'm really with an open heart and I send out that beam of love to you, you will feel it. Animals do. I mean, animals feel it. It's like the elephant. When I send out that beam of love, they reciprocated it and they were drawn. That's why I
Yes.
saw so many edifying. It's the same with human beings. Instead of sitting with judgment, why don't we just keep silent?
Yeah.
Go into our hearts and just broadcast love into them. Say, I love you just the way you are. I don't need to say the words, because words sometimes trip us up more than they actually open the heart. And then we also go into self-defense. I've got to defend myself,
Yes.
because I don't want to get hurt, whatever, they'll push you away. But if you actually go with your open heart and you broadcast that into the heart of the other, they cannot close themselves off.
Yes.
It will speak directly into their souls and back again.
God, there was this quote. I played that silent gathering. So we did it in a Zoom room, and it wasn't broadcast. And then we did a show and talked about it. And then I just ran it as a live on all the platforms, just to 20 minutes. And but a lady came into the room I was watching, and she put up a quote, and it was so incredible. And it talked about the masters, and it talked about silence, and it basically was talking about the reverence and the wisdom and the clarity that comes from silence. And this is why the masters, it was a description of their praise and gratitude and devotion to it. So, yeah, this has got to be, you know, well, I mean, it's the biggest wave we've had. But they've all been bigger than the one before, right?
Yeah, there's something so beautiful that is busy happening. It is. I think if we just, in a year's time, we won't recognize ourselves.
Yeah.
If you think in a few months' time now, even a year, how much we have changed. I know it from myself, how my life has changed just about in a year. Can you imagine how our lives would change just in another few months,
No,
in
you
another
said,
year?
yeah. You said that on the video, one of the videos that I told you I was putting on the Soulogy remix. And you said this in January, February, you will not recognize yourself in 3 months. You will not recognize yourself in 6 months. Now I'm listening to this about three or 4 weeks ago. And I'm thinking, oh my God, but it's true. It's true. And I keep getting this knowing or feeling or combination of all whatever, that everything is going our way. And one of the things too that I for myself that I picked up in the last 2 or 3 weeks is, especially since Morgan left, and I've spent a lot of time and things have happened, and so it's like Elysium, Atlantis, Lemuria, Avalon, all of these things coming back in, kind of filling in the blanks, and the sum total of it is that with that memory restored in us, individually, collectively, that we will understand that we didn't fail, so to speak, like you said, but that we have uh, all the memory intact, all the code, really. In other words, it's an advantage for us now. It's a strength for us now, and and because as a result of our history together, our lineage, we have made the right choices. And here we are. It's a promenade. It's a coronation.
I was reminded of that the other day when I was asking something, was just asking questions. But I always make sure now that I always, when I go into a silence, I always seek the holiest, the most sacred silence. Because as you seek the sacred space, you enter sacred space through your heart space. You enter the holies of holies. And that is where you actually find that yourself being lifted into omnipresence that you cannot lift in any other way, because that is sacred and holy space that you're entering.
Yeah.
And that is sanctified space. Now, if you are in that sanctified space, you will often be shown what you were before, or what you
Mm,
had done in the work
mm,
before. I'm
mm.
often shown that now. I'm shown myself as, this is what you did in that lifetime in order to anchor in this lifetime. And they always show me that everything you did is not wasted. You work those lifetimes towards this, because this is the ultimate moment.
Yeah.
Because what they say, so for many souls, this is the last incarnation on earth. In other words, they will not come back, because as a collective soul group, like the illumined ones, the shining ones, the graces, the loving ones, they actually work collectively for this moment to be returned to humanity. If you read Hancock and if you read Freddie Silver, etc., they always talk about the sages who brought back civilization back to humanity in the times of darkness. Those sages are actually the ones that have always carried humanity back into the light. And so often we're persecuted because of that. But
Yes.
once you have done that, you have had that experience. Now you don't need to repeat it again. Now you can use all the wisdom that you've gathered in those lifetimes and now channel it into a new form and into a new creation. Now, isn't that an amazing opportunity? that
Yes.
we can now at last co-create what we have taken so many lifetimes to bring into form and being. And I just want to get back to the white flame. So many of those souls who work with the white flame paid the highest price in other lifetimes because they walked the path of purity. They walked the path of purity with the intent of keeping the path clear for other people and showing the way.
Wow. As this bee's coming near me, my friend. Yeah, that's one thing
Bless you.
about, yeah, yeah, I'm living proof that the frequency attracts animals. I've had the birds came in here for 4 or 5 days. I'm doing shows and it's kind of sitting on the table. Just a lot of stuff happening. Yeah, that's yeah, what you said. I mean, we've
Sacred
talked.
and holy space.
Yes, yes, and I was going to ask you that. I don't know if I've ever asked you this before, but I might have told you before. But there's been several instances where, over the last 10 years, where a golden white light. It's like I'm in the room, and a light that you can't see, but a golden white light that's very distinct comes into the room. And a lot of times it'd be during I guess what you would call a download. But this past week, and one of them was on the show last night talking about the circle, and the other one I can't remember, but I was sitting here working. But twice in the last week, particularly this one that happened when I was doing the show with Giovanni and Morgan and the people that came on from the audience, the whole room got this golden white light again, and I could hear a really loud tone, and I got really chilled. What is the golden white light? Does that mean anything to you?
Christed light. That's the Christed light. That's
Christed
the
light.
Christ light. The Christ light is the highest frequency light. It goes with a white flame. It's a flame of illumination.
Yeah.
It's a flame of the Christed. Now Christed is like Buddhic. Remember that Christ was the universal Christ. He opened up for humanity to be able to move past duality into oneness again. So that's a universal Christed light. It's beautiful white gold. And then the purity of that is a white flame, because that even is an absolute purity of white.
Yeah,
The
white gold
is also white gold. Yeah.
Yeah, white gold would be the way. That would be the way to describe it. White gold.
That's right. And it comes down as an absolute tube of light.
Yeah, yes. And the thing I noticed about what happened this past week, the 2 times that it happened, was I knew in that moment, and this was a first for me, that it wasn't just me. Like this wasn't just it, because there was something going on in the field, and then my end of it, in my physicality in this room, it was showing up. But I knew that it was connected to the energy of the collaboration. So I thought, wow, this is, for it to happen once, because it's probably happened to me, I want to say maybe 20 times in 10 years, but it never has happened this like 2 in a row. And I thought, well, that's got to be another sign that we've
lifted into it now, and it forms like a portal. Once you have that portal, you can access universal. You can use anything in the universe. You're not limited on planetary level. That's what I try always to tell people. You're not limited on planetary level. We now have access through our soul for all our incarnations on any galaxy or star systems, and through all the universes. We can access knowledge now at a very high degree.
You're kind of like so many different things, but one of the things that you were a librarian in this incarnation, which I think is reflective of what I'm trying to get to. But when it comes to Judith Kusel, how do you seek information or code or knowledge, like anywhere, be it in the local Akashic or be it in, some other planetary system or something like that? Do you go in with forethought as to what you're seeking, or do you go in and say, what would you like to show me?
Sometimes I'm just in a place and I will immediately download because I tap into the energy of the place. But I mean, some places like, that are really sacred places, like Delphi, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
which was an oracle site. That the everything that's energetically stored is stored in that field, but that field is not just earthly bound; it's actually universal. But when I do my soul readings, I go into that universal field because I access that. Some call it the super consciousness. It's to me, it's whatever has actually been in creation has been stored. There's nothing under the central sun that is not energetically stored. And it's not stored in books or scrolls or whatever. Like people, they always think that under the swings, they will go and find, all these scrolls and books or whatever. The library is not a library like human beings think it is. It's actually energetic records. You get the planetary records, which some call the Akashic records. That's just to do with this planet. Then you get the solar records. Then you get the galactic records, then you get the universal records, and you get the omniversal records. The more tuned in, what I would do is I'm in this portal, and then I can go anywhere I wish to access that information. Most of the time, I don't even put the intent in. If I know that information needs to come to me, it will come.
Yeah.
With my soul readings, I do because people ask questions and then, the answers will come. But I've got no idea when I actually transmit it, I just type. I've got no recall of what comes through me afterwards.
Really?
I just total blank. I don't know, which is just as well because I've done over 5,000 of them. I would
My
go
gosh.
bonkers. I would go
Yeah.
bonkers if I were to remember all of them. And the thing is, everything is individual. There's not one that repeats itself, which to me is wonderful because it shows you that every soul is uniquely created. Now imagine if every soul is uniquely created, even within a soul group, how much power do you have and how much information you've got access to, which is unique to that
Yeah.
soul group. Now you put other soul groups and then the billions of them, well, it goes what trillions or whatever. So, and then your soul already has got access to your soul group collective consciousness and your soul group collective records, and it's got access to your galaxy of origin. We all come from other galaxies and star systems. Not one of us comes just from Earth. We all come from other galaxies and star systems. Now, just imagine within your soul, you already have access to all that knowledge. But what we do is we play small. We think that we need to have a book or education to tap into it. When I started off doing my journey in 2009, they said to me, from now on, you don't read books. You start listening and tapping into that higher information and start using that. Of course, now I now and then I will buy. Well, I've got so many books you can see libraries of because I just love a feel of books. But most of them I won't read. I
Yeah.
just open up pages where I need
Yeah.
information. It will come to me, and then that's it. But I have been told to trust what is given to me.
Yeah.
I've been told to trust what I tap into. I've been told to really go higher than I've ever felt before. And it has stood me the test of time because I might download something, I keep a journal and I start writing it down. And sure as not, it will be confirmed in some other way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people have made that conversion over the years just in a natural way. Like whether they declare it or not, they just don't, they're pulling all their information. Um, Another thing that I was going to ask you about today that came in a bigger way was I don't know how else to say this, but it had to do with portals. Portals. How do I say this? Portals were shown to me, like almost like a lesson on portals, right? And it was kind of like saying there are like natural portals. Then there's like portals that have been kind of made, um, that might be more like say in the I want to say like the 3D, even though it's a multi-dimensional kind of thing we're talking about. anyway, and it was, I saw a little bit, or however it was given to me. It was a little bit of, okay, so there was, say there was a group. There was portals being created, and they weren't necessarily, they were being coveted, or they were being hoarded, or they were being kept to an exclusive group, right? And then there was these portals that were always there, and then portals being created is how I would see what was shown, um, by people who are leveling up. And I guess the short uh, version of it is, it looked to me like a whole bunch of information about what we might call time travel. And again, I'm looking at it going, okay, what does this mean now? Because I'm already signed up. I think I was the first one in line for physical teleportation, right? And maybe that occurred the second night she got over at Australia. Maybe that was a taste of it. But there was something about time travel. It was a little bit more than just dimensional traveling, right? And flying around from, there was something, there was a time travel element. Does any of that mean anything to you?
Well, some of the most ancient sites are portals like that, that is why. But there's always been kept very much, with the mystery schools and so on, they all were sort of places that were like sacred and portals. But they kept that information very much within your ranks, because you had to go through certain initiations in order to access that.
Hmm.
Because if you don't know what you're doing and you're not really guided, you can get lost in that, sort of.
Right.
um, but some of it, actually, because I've noticed here in South Africa, and wherever I went, even in Mauritius and those places that I went to, you normally have it at the place where you've got the spiraling energy, the vortex energy. And but also you always have water, you have mountains, normally rocks or something, that brings the earth in.
Hmm.
And you normally have it's you will have a cave or something like that. It's a natural sort of like opening or something that actually gives you access. And then most of the times they actually build temples over them later on, which is like the holies of holies, where you literally could, those that were using those spaces probably knew where the jolly portals is. But in Europe, you definitely have it. So some churches you go in and you can actually feel the energy, because they used to be goddess sites, and then they went and built the churches over them, because a goddess has always been associated with the spiraling energy, the serpent energy. You
Yeah.
see, the serpent was actually the spiral.
Yes.
And in Chartres Cathedral, that used to be one of the most ancient goddess sites of Europe. You go to the stone hinges and so on; those are all spiraling energy that comes up there. And if I've actually, like the place that I was in the other day, at here next to me, there used to be pyramids there, and some of the pyramids sunk under the sea. And you sit there between 11 and 1 o'clock, just meditating. You lit that vortex energy comes up, and you can literally span dimensions and times. You go into totally different time frames there. You just sit there meditating on the beach. Most people are not aware of it, because most people just run around and do whatever it is.
Yeah.
But
Get a suntan.
funnily enough, they're drawn there. They're
Yeah.
drawn there.
Yeah.
But if you actually go and sit there and meditate, I mean, I have found it that you literally have. I was sitting like in the chamber, and this vortex energy was coming, and I was just sitting with my back to a rock, and there was a natural stone circle sort of like forming in front of me, going into the sea. But you could literally feel how that energy comes up, a vortex energy. And I totally lost track of time. I was really pulled in, and I knew that I could travel and I could access the information there that I needed, and I knew it. But afterwards, people walked past me and so they didn't even notice me, because I was totally in a different world, and then came back. So also you have it in some sites, like where I went in France. I knew that was an ancient energy site, but some of them have actually been misused. Because the same. again, the duality, the old duality, whatever it is. So both sides are sort of like attracted to it. But there are portals that are so pure that they were actually closed off. Okay.
Wow.
And they are busy now reopening. So there's different dimensional portals now opening. As the new earth opens, the different ones come open. But you see, in human history, they've always understood that. Why are people fighting over Jerusalem? Jerusalem is a very ancient portal.
Yeah. They say that about Iraq too. Iraq has a big Stargate. God, they're probably all over the place. One of the things that came up this past week too was that I was telling Franco, I think it was Franco, that I had driven into the big town over here to treat myself to a bowl of gumbo and a beer, after a few days of working. And it was a small bar, it was a restaurant, but it had the little bar section. And there was 3 people behind the bar, 2 to this side, 1 over here. And nobody saw me. It was very strange in the, the sequential aspect of the previous hours and days, because again, everything's speaking to us. And you just mentioned it right now about being on the beach and people walking by you. Do you think we're going to see more of that?
They become more and more invisible to those that are in the lower vibration, because they can't tune into the higher vibration, you see. Wow. So what happens is now you will have the 2 worlds sort of simultaneously living, as one. You'll be in a much higher frequency band than they hear. You'll find that even instrument can't pick you up anymore. Wow. Like radar, that type of thing can't pick you up anymore.
Wow, this will get interesting.
It will get very interesting.
I know. Well, and it was like, yeah, right. And it's like there's so many things falling away, and there's so much more multiplicity to what we. For what I'm only going to speak for myself, like the different streams coming in. They're just every single aspect is changing. And so there was a couple of instances, and people have talked about this, where I walked into environments that I'm familiar with, friends, places, whatever. This all happened at the same time of this incident at the restaurant. And what I had heard people talk about it, and then I was telling Morgan about it. I went into the space. I was definitely in observer mode, but there was something different. There was no adherence. There was no. I mean, I know we were connected. Don't get me wrong, but it was like energetically, it just wasn't a match. And I love the situation, love the people. No, I'm not in judgment, and I'm just driving away going, wow, that's kind of weird. Like I'm not going to be in that environment anymore. And so other things too, like food. There's certain things that are just falling away. Even eating is falling away. It's like I'm not even having to go, oh, I need to stop this, or I need to eat that. It's just falling away. And you know what I mean? I mean, it's affecting like every part of our life.
I find also if I need to go to town, it's almost like, oh, I'm not that vibration anymore. It's not because I'm doing it because you've still got to do shopping, whatever way you look at it. But it's almost like, okay, I want to get out of that vibration. It's not me. It's like I'm in a different form, in a different way. It becomes quite interesting sometimes, as you explained. It's going to get more and more interesting. And it's going to be like we manifest a new world where we just have food in a different way,
yes. Yes. Yeah, because I was I've been not making a joke, because I'm actually been doing it. Like the only, like for me, because the human to me is taking, I mean, like every day I have more respect, more reverence, and I'm just like, oh my God, So then I assess my situation and I'll go, I'm a little irritated that I can't reach over there and grab Morgan. And then I kind of flip it and go, okay, well, what we know why we're doing this. I don't get hung up on it. I'm just making a joke about it. But the reality that everything's changing to such a degree, and these things falling away. So when I start thinking about eating, sleeping, going to the bathroom, these things that are very human, I'm like, I wish they would go away. It's like a waste of time or something. But I think you're right. I think those things are going to go away while we're in the physicality. Boy, that would be mind blowing.
I think that what they always say to me, what is going to happen now is greater than you can even
Yeah.
imagine right now. And I
Yeah.
think that's always thinking to myself, wow, okay, I'm ready for it. Let's see what comes on.
Yeah. I bet
And
you
as I,
are. Yeah. I bet you are. You said that at the beginning of the show today. How, because so you said you started this in 2009. I'm sure you were downloading before then. And your story would be different. I walked the streets for 2 years, but I'm 50 years old, 6'2", 200 pounds. And you know what I mean? You are by physical stature. And so you took off on this journey like so many people and just defied conventional wisdom. How, I mean, you must be bouncing off the walls to see what's happening right now in 2021 after all
I
these
was just
years.
thinking today, wow, how much the world has changed.
Yeah.
Even since 2009, since I went on my journey,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, I've changed beyond recognition. And the thing is also what they tell me now, as we go into that higher state, more and more aspects of your soul will be reunited with you. So in
Mm-hmm.
other words, your other soul flames or whatever, they will be reunited inside you, not outside you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You will like take those aspects, that higher self or whatever comes into it, you will actually come and become as one with them, so that you can step fully into your mastery. So it's so many different levels of things that are happening. It's quite amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That is why people will suddenly find the genius. The genius
Mm-hmm.
comes out and they suddenly start inventing something that is relevant for the new world. But they never could do before. Suddenly they just be able to do it, because of those aspects of souls coming in. It's quite amazing that what we're going in. We are going to reach a type of mastery that we could not have done for millions of years.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's like
Just
space
to
travel.
yes.
We won't, the space aspect, we won't have like the spacecraft that they're using now, whatever. It will not be the same. It will be a different form of space travel. It's literally going to be where even quantum physics falls away, and we
Yeah.
have a totally different way of creating and also teleporting ourselves. I mean, I've been on the motherships where they actually showed me that if they want to go from one galaxy to the other, they teleport themselves. They
Yes.
don't need to go and physically fly there. They just goes up, booms, and they are in wherever they ever want to do. You see, we've lost all of that. At one stage we could, but now we've got to go back at it. And what they tell me, it's light and sound frequencies. So basically, if you know how light and sound works, and you know sacred geometries and sacred math, so you know how to apply that, you can literally co-create anything under the sun, whatever you wish to, within the divine laws, not
Yes.
outside of them. And
And that's
yeah,
a big
yeah,
thing too, because at an energetic level, those things that are not in alignment with divine law are not sticking anymore. So whether it be a vaccine or a mask or anything, it's not even the label or the story, but that's another thing that's happening. These things that are not true, or like the way you put it, not in alignment with divine law, they're not sticking. They're deconstructing, and if they try to be initiated, they just go like that, up
that's
and
right.
down, right? So that's going to be a big game changer too.
Because if you think of the interconnectedness of anything, if you're in a higher frequency band, you're already in a different interconnectedness than you were like in the 3D.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, that makes sense. And do you, so like, some of this, and it's so weird when I talk to you, it's not weird, but because I get so much comes back, and it usually happens right before, like we've talked about, it happens the night before, a few hours before. But one of the things that I was talking about earlier was with this, I would have said the portals and technology and there, what I was calling time travel. And I'm thinking, why is this coming in? And then I realized, well, it's just filling in so you remember everything or whatever. But one of the things I got out of it was where I said there was like two different factions. Like the one that I would say is us, which is in alignment with divine will, that's aligning in free will with divine will, and the other one's being for, let's just say, dualistic purposes. This is not uncommon knowledge. I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is, if that's true, which I believe it is, not that it's do or die, but and there's a faction, and this whole hoarding of esoteric knowledge, and you can call the 1%, Illuminati, all that, but the technology aspect where it starts to blend into what we might call the metaphysical or the etherical or dimensional or interdimensional. There are people playing with that now in this duality. And I just wonder how that's going to go, because people like you, certain people around the world that maybe don't get the headlines, they've got to be noticeable. You know what I mean? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me one day that you got a visit from the Men in Black. You know what I mean? I mean, but there's a reason that we're not being, uh, obstructed. And is it just because we're in alignment? I mean, is that another part of our reality to where we understand that we're actually going to turn the tables on, let's just say, controllers, just through our personal efforts? Do you think?
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, it's just me pondering.
No, but what I mean is that if what they always tell me, that if you go into a certain frequency band, the lower ones can't get into that,
So yeah, that would make sense. Well, if you're
because
walking,
to them, you know, what I mean, they cannot tap into that reality. It's important. You can't.
yeah.
You
So
know,
like, yeah, that's right. So if you're sitting on the
they
beach, yeah,
yeah,
and
they can't, because I mean it's because everybody really has their own reality.
yes, that
You
makes
know,
sense.
if
Yeah,
if some people, say, for instance, are very much tuned into the very low frequency, the basis, they will go into a shopping center and they will see just that, what attracts their attention. You understand? You will walk through the same shopping center and you will have a totally different experience from what they have. They cannot have your experience because they're not tuned into that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's another thing too, that kind of marries to what you're saying and helps me and I hope others to understand. So I was talking to Franco yesterday, the day before, and he was telling me about this exercise this experiment that he started doing a few years ago and played with it. And it was really interesting. He said you would get up and he would go out and start his day, and he was wondering why everybody was in a bad mood. Nothing was working out. So he went back home, he laid down, he brought himself into the highest balance and frequency he could, and then he went back and everything was fine. Like everybody was affected by his frequency, I guess is how you'd have to explain it. And that he'd done it many times. And I thought, wow, that is a very powerful experience because it's internalizing the reality of being able to do what I just described. So that reminds me with what you're explaining, because if somebody's walking by you with your back to the rock on the beach connecting to the spiral energy and they don't see you, then it would only make sense that, you know what I mean, what you're saying is true in terms of The boogeyman.
It depends on what you tune in. What I often do is, if I know I've got to go into the 3D for whatever reason, I immediately ask that only the love frequency goes with me.
Yes.
And then you see everything goes smoothly. But if you don't do that, then you will find you'll get blockages everywhere. It depends on what intent you put out there.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in that frequency band where you are totally balanced and in harmony, you are going to attract that outside yourself, because you see what's within yourself, you broadcast outside yourself.
Yeah.
So I just put the intent out that is what I wish to encounter.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
I don't
Yes,
know
it does.
how it works,
Well, I
but it
mean,
does
and
work.
yeah, and that's yes, and that's like, at night, as I lay down and I kind of go into this, in a very general way, let's just say deprogramming, reprogramming, right? And there's so many different ways to approach that, and so many different aspects that involves. But yes, that to me, what you're saying, setting it up, uh, because that's our command, that's our dominion, right? I mean, and it actually works. So many of these things seem to be as simple as ask, for instance, knock and it will be given to you. They just seem it's so simple, like right in front of our face. But I guess things got so complicated we couldn't see the trees for the forest.
I mean, if you ever read about Houdini, he was one of those that could get out of any situation. He actually mastered metaphysics in that regard, because he actually could get himself physically out of anything.
Who was this?
Houdini, it's H
Oh, yeah,
O
yeah, yeah.
U.
Houdini. No, your voice was really low. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. Yeah,
So I mean, I remember reading about that years ago for myself. It's amazing. I
yeah,
mean, yes, he had himself chained, did everything down, as he still managed to get through it.
yeah,
How does it, and he always said that if you actually are in that and you fear like a little bit, then you break the whole vibration, and then you get stuck. You can
yes.
even die. But if you keep a certain frequency, you can go through walls. You become invisible. You can literally get through any situation.
Yeah, I was watching a talk show the other day, and there was a gentleman on there, and I don't remember his name. And Houdini inspired him at a very young age. So anyway, he went on to be a magician. Then he went on to do things more like Houdini. And this man was buried alive. He was, I believe, buried alive for 44 days. Many other things. He talked about how he communicated with his body, how he was able to fast on just water, how he was able to be in a situation like that in terms of all human functions and so on. But the energetics behind it were incredible, and his understanding and his collaboration with his own body and his knowing with his own body. But for instance, he wanted to be buried where people could see him while he was buried. So he came up with this idea that he would be buried in ice, and he was there for a long time. You know, so here we go. I mean, to this whole trip is the physicality is an equal part of it. So when I see things like that, I'm going, wow. I mean, we think, okay, well, I can connect to the Akashic because Judith can, and we can all do these things. Yes, I get that. But to see someone in the physical, like Wim Hof or this guy, and go, wow, where are we headed with this? Because sooner or later, somebody's going to take off like Superman and be flying through the air, you know?
It just shows you that where are the limits? Are the limits in your mind?
Yeah,
Your soul doesn't have limits.
that's right. I'm soul. It's always such a gift talking to you. And I know I speak for everybody, but I mean,
But
I'm
you
just
see, the thing
very,
is, what I'm always told is that that the mind sets limits because the mind can only stretch that far.
Yeah.
Your soul knows the limitless, the infinite. The mind is finite.
Yeah.
And they always tell me, get out of the finite and move into the infinite.
Yes. I remember 10 years ago, I'd get several phrases, and one of them was, the complication of the finite mind and the infinite, the infinite simplicity of the soul. That's what that's why I said earlier, because it just seems like these little these little adages and these little rules of the road, and they're very simple. It's not rocket science. It is from the mind, but not from our essence, not from the heart, not from our soul. It's very simple. It's a simple lifestyle, if you want to put it that way.
I was just thinking about the ancient sites. I mean, I've been here on ancient sites, in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And, the San Bushmen, they used to be very much in charge of these sacred sites that are there, but most people are not even aware of. But I always, before I go into any place, I make sure that I call in, the guardians and keepers of those places and ask permission to enter. Because if you just barge in there, they're going to actually pull you out of there. You will either be sort of like frightened, awful, you will go somewhere else. They will not allow you access in that. But it's interesting because I was sitting on a site the other day and I was just tuning into the site, and I was tuning into the essence of the energy that was there. And immediately they showed themselves to me.
Really?
And what people do not understand is that we are already living in a multidimensional world.
Yes.
Some of these souls just withdrew themselves in a different dimensional state. They're not spirits. In other words, they're not stuck there.
Yeah.
But they just are in a different dimensional state. That is their way of serving in a higher way.
Yeah. Like non-form, possibly.
Not form.
Yeah. See, that's what you just said too. When I was telling you what happened on her second night in quarantine. So we talked about the next day or two, and I was like, wait a minute. I wonder if that's been happening all along. You know what I mean? And multidimensionality is seeing what's already going on. We're just, you know what I mean? To what you were saying, that is new to me too.
I actually, when I was in France, I took my students through that because we actually wanted to. I was asked to go and open up Mary Magdalene's Ancient Mystery School at a certain place in France, and that is on a sort of like a plateau outside the village, but we were actually sort of having lunch at a retreat center, which was more sort of like further down, and we had to sort of like climb this onto an uphill, onto a hill to get to that plateau. And I've never been stopped so much in my life by these guardians and keepers, what fine.
Really?
And I said to my students, I said, now see here, stopped here. We have to ask permission to enter. The energy fields will not open up if we do not ask permission. And I said, now watch how the landscape actually starts changing once you ask permission and that is granted. I said, now watch this same mountain. You will not recognize it by the time we get to the top. And we were stopped about 5 times doing this. And eventually I said to me, but this is not the same mountain. I said, yes. Now you are seeing the mountain in its truthful energetic form.
Wow.
Because you asked permission to enter. You were given that permission.
Wow, that's deep.
And now the truth is showing itself.
That's deep. That's really deep, what you just said. I mean, as a literal experience, but as a metaphor for energy, because you could apply what you just said to really every step we take. You know, one of the things that's come in for me in the last 2-3 weeks has been, and again, I struggle with these words because I can't say it right, but it's something to do with, and maybe it's a shift to me, but seeing, and it sounds corny, but seeing the divine in another person, regardless of what's regardless of what's being said or presented. So it reminds me of the mountain, because it's a lot like this show, 300 or 400 episodes into it, Morgan came and said, why don't you meet with the higher self? Why don't you invite the higher self to meet you beforehand? So I did. I'm getting chills. And so now I talk to people and it's a multi-dimensional experience, right? So it's like the mountain. I can see what you're saying, even the whole world. You're looking at what you are supposed to look at based on your level of awareness, your level of whatever. And then it's like dragons. Like, I've had experiences where I come to a cave entrance and there's 2 dragons and they're like, you're not going in until you reach this frequency. So it's just like that. And so the mountain thing is really powerful. That's a really good anecdote. I want to ask you one more thing before we get out of here. This, and I don't know if you know what you know about this, but I have to honor the synchronicities and everything. So last night I love Robert Sepper at Atlantean Guardians. He's an anthropologist and an etymologist, linguist, and he does incredible work. Incredible. Probably got 400 productions out there, 4 books. Well, he did one on the Emerald Tablets. It's a 28-minute production, and I would highly recommend it to everyone. One thing about his work is the titles don't usually encompass the entire production's message, and this one was very much like that. And as an example, at the end of the show, he had a commentary of 3 or 4 minutes in regard to chi, in regard to life force, and particularly in regard to intimacy, procreation, sacred sexuality. And what he was talking about, he was pulling from facts, because he's a scientist, he's a researcher. And he was talking about the knowledge, the wisdom passed on, and the beliefs and the practices going as far back as you could go, which were the goddess religions, by the way, and how, so just to give you an idea. So this was part of a story of a production that was entitled The Emerald Tablets and Thoughts. Now, the thing that I wanted to ask you about, he read this passage from the Emerald Tablets, and he explained it in a very well. And I just thought it was really powerful because it talked about within, without. It talked about our abilities, our potential, how things work. And I just wondered if you had any run-ins or any knowledge of the Emerald Tablets and what your thoughts were on it.
The Emerald Tablets were actually of a much higher collection, because Thoth it's also known as Tahuti. He was high priest in Atlantis, and he took basically when he knew, because they knew that Atlantis was going to fall. They already knew, the sages and whoever knew that. He actually took his work to Egypt, and he started, and he's also known as Hermes.
That's right, Hermes.
Hermes, yeah. And the Emerald Tablets is one of these that actually survived, because when they burned the Library of Alexandria, most of the Hermetic texts were lost. But luckily they found the Templars actually found them in Haran, which was also one of the ancient mystery schools there. And apparently some of the scrolls are still sort of in the desert somewhere that have survived, which they just are keeping out of wraps for humanity until humanity is ready for them. But the Emerald Tablets are very deep in that they bring you the universal laws of creation
Right.
in a very simple form. And
Yeah.
you can read that and just say, you know, well, it won't go anywhere. But each sentence has actually got a whole universe within them.
Yeah. That's why I asked you, because I've come across it before and it didn't really do anything for me. I was like, is
That's
this
right. You've
programming?
got to tune into those
Yeah.
scripts.
But last night it did. And the only thing I can draw a comparison to was what is it? The Beatitudes in the Bible from the
That's
Sermon
right.
on the
Yeah.
Mount.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing happened to me. I read that and I'm like, what is that all about? But then later on, I came across somebody who translated it based on the etymology of the words at the time. And I was like, whoa, okay. So it's the same type of thing. You're right. It's like in every sentence, there's a universe, right? My beloved is about to break out of quarantine, evidently, in 10 minutes.
Lovely. Yay.
Get on a plane. So I'm going to call her real quick. It's always such an honor to be with you and share space. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. Everybody get over to judithkusel.com. She probably doesn't have enough going on and she might need some sessions. Sketch.
Yeah, I'm actually going to have a webinar in 2 weeks' time. And
Oh,
I'm
you're going to have a
getting back
webinar.
to my, on the spinal column and the new spinal column, etc. So that's
really?
going to be. And then I also, my soul readings will continue from next week on, when I have had my quarantine too.
You have a quarantine too. Oh my God.
Well, the way they have been keeping me silent, and it's reading it
I
for the
got you.
last few weeks. Yeah.
So yeah, if you remember, or if you get a chance, send me the link for the webinar, if you would, if you remember. And yeah, I'd like to take a look at that. Thank you. Love you.
Thank you so much, and have a lovely conversation and reunion with your beloved.